The RX 6800 XT is one of my favorite Radeon graphics cards of all time. I purchased back in 2020 when they first dropped. It was this very model you're seeing on screen, the Strix LC, which retailed for $900. Yes, that was its launch MSRP at the time, which went up even higher months later due to increased import taxes, then a cryptocurrency boom, followed by a global pandemic, which made all graphics cards even more expensive. Now fast forward 4 years later, and this GPU can be obtained for around $300 to $400, be it from online retailers or in the second-hand market, at least here in the US. I've had a few viewers leaving comments about their experience finding these cards for that price recently, so I wanted to make this video focusing on how this card handles 4K gaming in a bunch of modern popular AAA titles. For our setup, we're going to be using a Strix B550F gaming Wi-Fi motherboard with a Ryzen 5900X paired with 32 gigs of 3600 MHz CL16 memory. We're going to begin with a banger of a title, one of my favorites, one of the best RPGs ever in my opinion, and that is Kingdom Come: Deliverance. I wanted to tackle this one first because its sequel got announced just the other day. Kingdom Come: Deliverance 2 is coming in 2024, guys. That is extremely exciting. Probably my most anticipated game this year. I have prepared a total of 23 games for you guys, and they will be marked down below. But we're gonna obviously focus on 4K 60 here, and that's what we got going on. HD textures on and everything else. We've maxed out the anti-aliasing and chosen the ultra-high graphical preset, which was actually designed with very future hardware in mind when this game launched. This game is quite a bit old, and when it launched, you could not run it maxed out, even with the best hardware. It was very, very demanding. And as a matter of fact, it still is demanding. You can see how it says these features were experimental at the time. But today, the 6800 XT can run this game at 4K native with everything maxed out at 60 plus FPS. It's not always perfect, mind you. There will be some hitches here and there. I guess that's kind of unavoidable, especially when you enter some of these towns, and I believe it probably has something to do with the loading, perhaps. But for the most part, it's really good. I mean, you can see the 1% lows are very close to our FPS averages, which is ideally what you want to see. Game looks amazing. There's also a pretty good modding scene with this game. You can even add ray tracing in it. It's a beautiful game, guys. It's not your typical hero story where you're the chosen one. No, you're just a peasant and sort of like a naive teenager that is thrust into the harsh realities of a medieval world, I guess. But it's a very interesting and immersive journey, I find. Now, the interesting thing about this, I'll let you know, is that I played this game the first time was on a PlayStation 4. What a pleb. Just kidding. But it was only at inconsistent 30 FPS. Yeah, it didn't run very well at all. And I've been meaning to go through another playthrough on PC. With the way it looks, it's absolutely beautiful. So I will be doing that, especially with the second game coming out. And right now, guys, this game is on sale for only $5.99. It's a steal. Absolutely worth it. Very good game. For the next game, we're going to take a look at Dragon's Dogma 2, another amazing RPG that I've been completely consumed by. I think I'm 80 hours in right now, and I'm getting close to the point of no return. So I guess this could be considered a tiny little spoiler, but I'm not going to show any story pieces. But this is another really good game with some performance problems, unfortunately. However, the 6800 XT does pretty well here. We're targeting 4K. With FSR set to quality and ray tracing disabled. Although it is possible to use ray tracing here as well. However, it can sometimes lead into some inconsistencies, mostly that can be CPU related in some areas. But the game looks beautiful regardless. And the 6800 XT does actually a really, really good job, except for in the big city areas. But that's not the fault of the 6800 XT. It mostly comes down to CPU utilization, basically. But I did record the entire fight here, which took me around a half an hour. It's a big event. And if we look at the end of the recording, our measured 1% lows are in the low to mid 50s. That's actually really good. It's actually very smooth. if you think about it. So 6800 XT at 4K, Dragon's Dogma 2, very playable, 60 plus FPS. The next game I'd like to take a look at is Guardians of the Galaxy. One of my favorites, really good writing, hilarious. If you like the movies, it's a must play and can be had really cheap these days. Came out in 2021, but looks beautiful. Here we're going to be targeting 4K, 100% resolution scale, and we're going to turn ray tracing off for now. Now this game has a built-in benchmark, so that's what we're going to be taking a look at, but as you can see, the game looks absolutely gorgeous, and the ray trace reflections in it are actually really good as well. But the screen space are not too bad, actually. This is with screen space reflections, and the 6800 XT can deliver a high refresh rate experience at 4K, and this is native. Now, unfortunately, when this game launched, FSR 2, I believe, was not around, and it does have FSR 1, which at 4K, actually, it can look pretty decent at the quality or even ultra quality preset. But unfortunately, the game has not gotten an update with FSR 2. It's been abandoned, unfortunately. This game was really, really good, very well received by everybody, actually. Now, what I'd like to try here is enable ray trace reflections and ray trace transparent reflections. So that's reflections off transparent surfaces like glass, for example. It actually looks really, really good in this game. We had the GPU headroom, and we appear to be around 55 to 60 FPS, guys. This is native 4K with ray trace reflections and transparent reflections. Looks really, really good. Very impressive, actually. I did play this game at 1440p when it came out on the 6800 XT with ray tracing, actually. I made a video about it back then when I didn't use to talk in videos. But that's how I played it, and it was gorgeous. However, there is other settings to ray tracing as well. So we started with high, there is an ultra, and then there's also another one ultra high above that. So let's take a look and see if we can make that happen with some FSR perhaps. We're gonna go from high ray trace reflections to very high to ultra. We'll skip very high. Let's see if we can max the ray tracing out. And obviously we're gonna have to use some FSR here as well. So with FSR 1 set to quality and ray trace reflections to ultra now, so everything is maxed out here, we are able to maintain around a 60 FPS experience. Now yeah, FSR 1 is not as good as FSR 2, but again at 4K it's not really all that bad. And yeah, the image quality actually looks pretty good. There are a couple areas that I can notice a bit of instability, like if you look at that little grate in the back there by the store. You can see a little bit of flicker there, so stuff like that does stand out a bit. But again, you have the flexibility. You could even try resolution scale. I haven't actually tried that, but just exploring the possibilities here. So very playable, very good game, highly recommended. 6800 XT kills it in here at 4K. Let's check out the next game. Next is going to be Alan Wake 2, one of the most demanding games out right now. For this one, we're going to be using FSR quality, which actually looks pretty good in this game at 4K. And we're also targeting the high quality preset, which doesn't max everything out, but it's pretty close. Ray tracing is off. Obviously, I don't think ray tracing is worth it in this game with any AMD GPU. Even on my 7900 XTX, the compromise is great, actually. Especially when you're targeting 4K. But the game looks gorgeous, even without ray tracing. Now, one thing I did notice here is that if you look at the frame time, we do get a little hitch here and there, which actually retried this area multiple times, and it happens every time. Now, it's not consistent. It doesn't happen every time, but in some of these walking sections, it does happen. And I don't know if it has something to do with loading. I'm not sure. But it's not really all that noticeable. But you know, it all depends how sensitive you are, right? But the game still looks absolutely gorgeous on a 4K screen. I'm using an LG C1 for this. It looks fantastic. Absolutely stunning looking game. This is another one of those games where I kind of forgot all about it, actually. I might have to play through it at some point, but I don't know. It didn't really grab me as much as I thought it would have. But I do plan on going back. But that's besides the point. We're checking the capabilities of the 6800 XT here. the developers have apparently gone back and optimized the game even further so that it runs on less capable GPU. So I don't know how that impacts the performance on the 6800 XT today versus how it was when it launched, but I can only judge it for what I'm seeing on the screen. And this is running extremely well in my opinion. And you could even try to lower FSR from quality to balance to gain some more performance if you wanted to. Although for this type of game, this level of performance is actually pretty good. With a VRR display, feels very nice. Those hitches, again, I'm not sure what those are all about, but it wouldn't prevent me from enjoying the game at all. It's actually the game that would prevent me from enjoying it, if that makes sense. Anyway, let's jump on to the next game. And the next game's going to be Lies of P. Again, we're targeting 4K with the best graphics quality preset, no FSR, and I ran into some strange behavior here. Now look at the frame time. It's all jittery, and you can kind of feel it actually, but it's not consistent either. So if we face the train station, it goes away. But if we face that way, backwards, it comes back. I'm not sure why that is, but what I decided to do was I tried to use a 60 FPS frame rate cap through the RivaTuner statistics server that comes packaged with MSI Afterburner, and as you can see, it was perfectly locked at 60 FPS, including 1% lows. Now for me, 4K 60 or 60 FPS in general is kind of my minimum, right? There are some games where I would make an exception to maybe 40 or even 50 FPS, like the slow type of games, maybe like an Alan Wake or something like that. But for a game like this, I think 60 FPS is perfectly fine. For me, 90 would be ideal. So I'm not really sure why the frame time looked like that. So if you've experienced the same thing, let me know. I did benchmark this game when it came out on my other GPUs, and I don't recall that being like that, but I could be wrong. I'm not entirely sure. But I know a lot of people love this game, and for good reason. Personally, I'm not the biggest Souls fan, although I have been playing more of them somewhat recently. Like Elden Ring, for example, I enjoyed that a lot, and I did actually play a little bit of Dark Souls 1, funny enough, on my Nintendo Switch years ago, and I did like it. Actually, I played through halfway through the game, I think. And I do enjoy that challenge and the satisfaction you get from when you defeat a boss, that, you know, you learn the fight. I find that to be satisfying. So I understand why a lot of people like this game. But anyway, it is on my list of games that I would like to play at some point. But anyway, let's check out the next game. The next game we're taking a look at is Forza Motorsport. We're going to run the built-in benchmark for this, and we're going to check out ray tracing disabled with maxed out settings and ray tracing maxed out settings. So with ray tracing disabled, then we're able to get a 4K 60 experience here. Absolutely, actually quite a bit above 60. I would say around 75 FPS. And this is actually quite a bit of a demanding part of the game with rain and a bunch of cars. So it is representative of the worst, in my opinion. This is how I would play this game. And I've actually put a lot of time in this game because I do enjoy racing. And actually come a long way, even though it released with some issues. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and max out the ray tracing. So that is full ray trace reflections and ambient occlusion. Now the reflections are not really all that noticeable in this game, guys. I've actually done a lot of comparisons. In this benchmark, you'll be able to notice it at the canopy of this stadium area here, where you can clearly see the reflections. But while you're playing, 99% of the time, you're not going to really notice it. The cube map reflections are actually really good in this game. But with ray tracing fully maxed out, we're between 40 and 50 FPS. Not ideal for a racing game. But what about FSR? Well, let's find out. We'll set FSR to balance this time, and yeah, it doesn't really work. FSR's been broken in this game. As a matter of fact, DLSS is not all that much better, but we went from a 48 FPS average to 54. So that's 4 FPS, about 8% gain in FPS. That is not. We're supposed to see a lot more than that, going from 4K native to FSR balance. Only 8%? No, it's not really good. But anyway, let's move on to the next game. Well, since we took a look at an Xbox game, it's only fair we check out a Sony PlayStation game. And we're going to take a look at the latest Horizon Forbidden West at 4K native with the very high graphics quality preset. And this is literally one of the best looking games that I have in my library. Very good. I actually played this on the PlayStation 5 for a bit as well because it came with it. And even on the PlayStation, this game is what Sony studios are able to do with the hardware they have is actually very impressive. As a PC guy that understands hardware to some degree, what they're able to pull with that 32 compute of RDNA 2 GPU in the PS5, that's essentially running a laptop profile as far as the power management, is very impressive. Absolutely. But the PC port of Ryzen Forbidden West, not perfect, but pretty close. There was some issues with NVIDIA Reflex causing a bit of a frame time stutter. And you can see that here as well, actually, a little bit. It's not, you're not going to really notice it while playing. It's so tiny, it's so small. But if you're looking at the frame time graph, you can see it. And I know that's not how people play. I am actually constantly reminded by some of the commenters about this. I know we're just analyzing the game, guys, to see how it runs. That's kind of the purpose of this, and it runs extremely well. Not a locked 60 FPS, but pretty close, and on a VRR display actually feels very, very smooth. However, we do have access to FSR as well, and the FSR implementation in this game is actually pretty good. So why don't we take a look at FSR quality? FSR quality sees us go from around 55 FPS to around 75 FPS. So that's about 30-40% increase in performance. That's actually really good. It's kind of what you want to see, and the game still looks really good. Again, like I said, the FSR implementation in this game and DLSS as well actually is very good. Now, if I remember correctly, is that the PlayStation 5 runs this game at native 4K 30 FPS with a very high settings. The 6800 XT has double the RDNA 2 computers of the PlayStation 5. So 36 on the PS5, 72 on the 6800 XT, and we're able to run the game pretty close to 4K native 60 FPS. Now I know it's not how it exactly works. Double the compute units does not mean that it's double the gameplay performance, but it almost kind of adds up to be that in this case, doesn't it? Kind of close. Very interesting. Let's take a look at another Xbox game though. This one is actually one of my favorites.
Climb that wall there.
See how you like this?
Into the camp.
And that Xbox game is Microsoft Flight Simulator. I love this game. It's kind of like my therapy. As a matter of fact, with a VR headset, it's out of this world, literally. But we're going to start here with 4K native 100% resolution scale TAA DX12 with the Ultra Global Render Quality preset. And we're flying above Tokyo with Mount Fuji to our left. And we're pretty close to 60 FPS. Now for this game, even 30 FPS would be just fine because it's very slow paced. It doesn't require any fast reactions or anything like that. Now obviously 30 FPS is not ideal because visual fluidity does matter. And at the frame rate that we're currently getting on my C1 LG TV, it looks absolutely stunning. It's extremely good looking game. Now the performance in this game can vary because if there's a lot of storms, or actually if you're even closer to the ground, the game does become more demanding. But this is kind of a very good middle ground, I would say, and very representative of the type of experience you can expect with a 6800 XT targeting 4K in Microsoft Flight Simulator. However, we also do have FSR in this game, and let's check it out, see what type of performance we can get with FSR set to quality, because that actually does look pretty good in this game. FSR set to quality, apply and save, and let's see what we get. We should be getting a pretty decent bump to our frame rate, and yes we do. We went from the mid 50s to the mid 70s. Again, we've seen similar performance gains to what we saw in Horizon Forbidden West, around 40-ish%. That is actually really nice. And as you can see, the game still looks pretty good. Now, despite FSR's shortcomings and it needing to catch up to DLSS as far as the quality, we are actually getting that with FSR 3 update coming a little bit later. At 4K, FSR still looks pretty good, I would say. And in this game in particular, looks just fine. So, yeah. Microsoft Flight Simulator on the 6800 XT at 4K looks absolutely gorgeous. Stunning, awesome experience. Highly recommend it. It is very therapeutic. At least check it out if you have Game Pass. It's a no-brainer. And it's actually currently on sale. there's a Microsoft Game Studios publisher sale on Steam currently. Some pretty good games. Anyway, let's check out the next game. Well, since we looked at another Xbox game, let's look at another PlayStation game. Trying to keep both sides of the console warriors happy. But anyway, we're targeting 4K here with 100% render scale, and for graphics, we've maxed everything out as high as they can go. Now, I've already beat this game. I loved it. It was awesome. The sequel, played on the PS5, not nearly as good. The story was kind of But this game is actually great. I would totally recommend it, especially these days. You can probably find it at much cheaper. But what I'm doing here, I think it's the Realm Mephelheim, I forget. But it's, you essentially fight waves of enemies. And I'm extremely rusty because I haven't played the game in a long time. But the purpose of this clip is to essentially show how the 6800 XT does at 4K. And it does excellent. We're well above 60 FPS. As a matter of fact, we're pretty close to 90, which is perfect. It's awesome. For this type of game, for me, like I said before, 90 would be perfect. Now, if we were to enable FSR, we could probably get close to 120. Although I did not check for that because it does so well at 4K native with all the settings maxed out anyway that I didn't feel it was necessary. But yeah, God of War runs amazing on the 6800 XT. Excellent 1% lows, excellent performance. On to the next game. Now, the next game I want to take a look at is Tales of Kenzera ZAU. There's a demo on Steam out right now. This game was announced at the Game Awards, the last one. And it kind of caught my eye because it's a Metroidvania type of game. And I do like those. I do find those very enjoyable. The last Prince of Persia, actually, that game was excellent. Very well optimized, ran very fluidly. Even on the Nintendo Switch, it ran at 60 FPS. So this is not the type of game I would think to be really all that demanding. But we're going to test it at 4K. With all the settings maxed out, 100% resolution scale, obviously. And yeah, let's see how this game runs. So this is an EA game. And yeah, guys, it's actually not good at all. Look at those stutters. Those are shader compilation stutters of the highest magnitude. Very, very unpleasant. But on top of that, I mean, the game is extremely demanding too. I mean, we're using a 6800 XT, and I know it's 4K, but the game is not really that highly detailed. Well, what I tried to do is I tried to set a 60 FPS cap because that usually tends to help sometimes, and it does help to some extent, although we still do experience stutters here and there. Now, this is a demo. It's not the final version of the game, but this is also EA, right? I personally can't say that I've tried a demo and then when the game released shortly after, it was improved at all. So this is kind of strange. Now I expect that this probably runs much better on console because shader compilation stutters are not really a thing on console, but they are on PC, and I'm really surprised that they let this one launch like this because it's very unpleasant. So yeah, I'm not going to really bother with the rest of it because Metroidvanias have to be extremely smooth. Actually, do you want to know how Metroidvanias should run? Here's a very good example. The new Prince of Persia game. We're pretty much hitting engine limits at 360 FPS. And this is at 4K with maxed out graphical settings as well. Runs mint. Really, really good. And this is actually a very good game as well. Unfortunately, I lost my save file. So this is the very beginning of the game. I had made it about 70% through the game. And I re-downloaded it through the Ubisoft Connect app on my PC. And my save file is missing. I don't know why. I have other Ubisoft games that do a pretty good job with saving save files to the cloud, but apparently something happened here. So I'm not happy about that, but that's not the point of this video. I don't want to begin ranting about things like this. I just want to point out that this game looks really good. It's got a very nice art style to it, and it's a very good Metroidvania as well. Made by the same team that did Rayman Legends, another excellent Metroidvania that is not only a good game, but looks really good. Very timeless. So yeah, I think this one's going to age very well. I actually played the Nintendo Switch version as well. I played the demo. And Prince of Persia on the Switch runs really well as well. Unlike Tales of Kenzera, which runs horrifically on PC. But anyway, let's check out the next game. For the next game, we may as well look at another Ubisoft game that takes place in Persia. And that is Assassin's Creed Mirage. We're targeting 4K with 100% resolution scale and maxed out graphical settings. We're going to go ahead and check out 4K native first, but we also have FSR in this game as well. I think this is the first Assassin's Creed game to have FSR. I could be wrong. Now, this isn't a particularly next-gen looking title or anything, although I do think that it actually looks pretty good. You can criticize Ubisoft about a lot of things, and believe me, there's a lot of things to criticize Ubisoft about. But one thing they do quite well is they optimize their games on PC. They're usually always very well optimized. Now, as far as Assassin's Creed Mirage, I think it actually looks really good. I love the setting, and the 6800 XT absolutely nails it here. 4K 60 plus experience all day long. You could lock it and have a very consistent 60 FPS experience, or you could even check out FSR quality, which we are going to do, and see if we can increase our performance at not much of a loss to image quality. So let's check out FSR quality. Speaking of FSR, you can actually use FSR in this game for native anti-aliasing, as you can see here, but we're going to go with quality, but you can actually do it. And it's not that many games that utilize FSR in this way, except for Avatar, Frontiers of Pandora, and a couple others, I believe. But it actually does a pretty good job. And I believe you would be able to do 4K 60 with FSR set to native AA. But with FSR set to quality, we're hitting the 90s. And this is, like I said, something I prefer. I like 90 FPS in these type of games. If it's locked, I prefer that. As you can see in this game, that is very possible with FSR set to quality. Again, Ubisoft does a good job in optimizing their games. That's something you can't really criticize them about, especially when it comes to other big AAA publishers who don't do the best of a job. But as you can see here, the 1% lows are really good. Frame time graph is nice and solid. AC Mirage, I recommend it. I personally liked it. It's not very long either. It's pretty good. I think at around $30, $40, I think it's worth it. But anyway, let's check out the next game. We still have quite a few to go through. While we're at it, why don't we take a look at another Ubisoft game, and that's Avatar Frontiers of Pandora. And we're targeting 4K native with the high quality preset. And yeah, unsurprisingly, we can't maintain 60. This game is quite taxing. It's also one of the best looking games out right now. It has multiple ray tracing effects, and as you can see, we seem to be between 30 and 40 FPS. Also, we're on the high quality preset. There's actually an ultra quality preset as well, and there's also a hidden unobtainium one, which is for future hardware. But I think high actually looks really good, personally. I don't think there's a huge difference between the high and ultra quality preset. Again, usually high to ultra kind of has diminishing returns, but regardless, I think we're going to need the help of a bit of FSR here to be able to get closer to 60 FPS. For an action game like this, 60 is a minimum in my opinion. This is one of probably the best examples of FSR implementation. This has FSR 3 implementation in it, and I think it actually does a really good job. And by using FSR, we're able to get much closer to 60 FPS. Whereas previously we were between 30 and 40 FPS, now we're between 50 and 60. That is a very nice jump in performance, and our 1% lows are still really good. They actually were really good even at 4K native, although our frame rate was low. Still, again, Ubisoft knows how to optimize their games. I mean, they may make the same game over and over. Actually, Avatar Frontiers of Pandora is kind of like that, because while I did put many hours into it, it did get kind of boring. I lost interest. The story wasn't but the atmosphere was pretty cool. The way the world looked and exploring it was actually satisfying, but to an extent. So yeah, I kind of abandoned this game, unfortunately, but it is a good title to benchmark. But anyway, we are able to essentially hit that 60 FPS target with FSR set to quality, but we do have access to frame generation as well. So why don't we take a look at that and see what that does for us. With FSR quality and frame generation, we're now able to hit around 90, 80 FPS. So we added about 30 FPS on top of what we were getting with FSR quality alone. That's about a 50% increase in frame rate. Now, It's not going to feel like 90 FPS, obviously, as far as latency and responsiveness goes, but the visual fluidity definitely helps, and it does look very nice and fluid, especially if you have a 120 Hz 4K display. So while the 6800 XT may struggle to do 4K native in this very new and demanding game, it can actually do it with some FSR quality and a few more settings tweaked. Again, to get 4K 60 with Ultra preset in this game, you need an RTX 4090. So all things considered, 6800 XT, I think it does really, really well. Anyway, let's check out the next game. The next game on our list will be Baldur's Gate 3, one of the greatest CRPGs perhaps. Now here we're going to target 4K again, and this game has gotten many updates since it launched. It didn't actually have FSR2, and now they've added FSR2. Other than that though, we've maxed out all the settings, which is essentially a mix of high and ultra. Performance in this game is not necessarily perfect. Like if you look at the frame time graph, there seem to be these like hitches, but it's not everywhere. As soon as you get out of town, they actually go away. But I was trying to figure out what this was. I don't know. Have you guys noticed this before? I actually recently benchmarked this game on my 4090, the same exact spot. I was doing a CPU versus video, and I did not notice that. So I'm not sure what's causing it, but I tried over and over and it was the same thing. Other than that though, it kind of goes away once you leave that town. And other than that, I mean, it's okay. You do get a couple hitches here and there, but for the most part, it's actually pretty smooth. If you look at the 1% lows, they're pretty good. Now, I've always been kind of a fan of CRPGs. I love all kinds of RPGs. JRPGs, CRPGs, ARPGs, all kinds of them. And I love how Baldur's Gate has blown up in popularity, and I'm hoping that this will actually motivate more devs to make CRPGs. What I would love to see is a Star Wars CRPG. My mind would be blown if I find out that Lian is working on a Star Wars CRPG, because they're not going to be continuing with Baldur's Gate 3, which is fine. I know some people are upset about that. Personally, I'm not. I would love to see what they come up with next, because I've really enjoyed their previous games, Divinity Original Sin. They're very solid games that offer so much content for the money. I mean, you could replay these games over and over and have a great time. Now, I haven't played this game in quite some time. The character that I'm controlling now is actually my friend's character that got stuck in the party. Just been busy with other games that I have to go back and finish Baldur's Gate 3. But again, purpose of this video is to talk about and look at the 6800 XT, and at 4K, as you can see, it's for the most part very good. Let's take a look at the next game, which is another isometric RPG, but a little bit different. It's very good. The next RPG we're taking a look at is Last Epoch. This is a Diablo-like type of RPG that's way better than Diablo 4 in my opinion anyway. We're going to begin by maxing out the graphical settings and see what the 6800 XT is capable of here. I actually have not tested this game previously on my 6800 XT, so let's take a look at it and throw the performance metrics up on the screen, and we appear to be around 50, drop into the 40s. Okay, so the game is a little bit more demanding than I actually expected. However, it seems to be running rather smooth at the moment. Now, this game has actually multiplayer co-op as well, so it's more like a older school Diablo type of game, maybe Diablo 3. This game was actually in early access for a while. That's how I got into it, but it recently went to live version 1.0 and now has co-op multiplayer as well. Now, if you look at the performance here, it's not great, and what I believe is happening here, I think this is some sort of a shader caching type of thing going on, because when I try the same exact area again after changing the settings, I don't experience those stutters. So I think that's what's actually happening. I don't know how this game caches its shaders, but it must be by encountering things, I would assume. I'm not sure what engine they're using. I haven't really looked that up, but the game is actually very, very interesting. The setting actually reminds me of Chrono Trigger, because you go towards the end of time and then the prehistoric times and then times in between. That's what the epoch in the name stands for. So that is kind of interesting. The classes are quite complex as well. But getting back to the 6800 XT, now that we appear to not be having any shader caching issues, we appear to be around a 60 FPS. I would say, even though it's not a lock 60, I would consider this to be a 60 FPS experience. On VRR display, it actually feels pretty good to play. But what I want to do is I want to go from the ultra graphical preset to the high graphical preset. See if we can gain some extra performance that way. What we're going to do is we're going to change the master quality from ultra to very high. What that essentially does is it knocks every graphical setting down a peg. And let's see if that improves our performance at all. And yes, it does. 90 FPS. When we entered this area previously with the ultra preset, we were getting around 60 FPS, sometimes dropping a little bit below into the mid 50s. But yeah, we gained another 20 to 30 FPS more. So that is really good. We're getting around 30 to 40% more performance just by lowering the graphical preset from ultra to high. Again, you can see that the game looks really good. And again, the idea of maxing out your graphical settings can sometimes have diminishing returns. I think the game still looks great. I can't personally really notice a difference that stands out to me anyway, but this one does feel more fluid and more pleasant to play, I would say. Although 60 FPS is fine too. But anyway, let's take a look at the next game. The next game I'd like to take a look at is Hogwarts Legacy, and we're gonna start with 4K native with maxed out ultra graphical settings and ray tracing disabled. We're gonna run around the town of Hogsmeade, where I would say this is probably the most demanding area in the game, and that is most demanding on the CPU actually. Although we are GPU bound in this particular scenario, but we appear to be around 50 FPS, so not quite 4K 60, but again, very impressive. This game is quite a bit taxing on the hardware, and this is actually another very good game that I enjoyed quite a lot. I spent quite a bit of time playing it, but again, I got kind of bored towards the end, and I sort of abandoned it, I guess. Story of my life. But let's get out of this city and see if our frame times improve a little bit. I believe they will, because Town of Hogsmeade is quite CPU intensive, especially when you turn ray tracing on. But I'm avoiding ray tracing for now because I just feel it's not worth the cost of performance. But as you can see here, we are hitting the mid 50s outside. And I would say this is probably what you're gonna mostly experience if you were to target a native experience. But what about FSR? Will that improve our performance? Let's check it out. Let's throw on FSR quality and see what we get. Okay, that is actually a very impressive jump. We were at around 40 to 50 FPS in this area, and we've gone up to the low to mid 80s, dropping to the 70s now as we enter the town. Of course, it's going to be a little bit more taxing, but FSR doesn't look the greatest in this game. What I've noticed is the foliage is usually what tends to give FSR a bit of a hard time. You'll see the usual flicker and that sort of thing. But at 4K resolution, FSR quality actually does a pretty decent job. And it's probably how I would be playing this game if I was to be playing it through on my 6800 XT. But still, even if you were to target 4K native, you would be somewhat close to that 60 FPS. But in my opinion, it does require FSR to play in a more more fluid and enjoyable experience, in my opinion. So yeah, 6800 XT Hogwarts Legacy, absolutely. 4K does a pretty good job. Anyway, let's check out the next game. The next game I want to take a look at is one I haven't looked at in a long time, and that's The Last of Us Part 1. Now, this game has had quite a bunch of updates, but I do know that it's extremely taxing. So what we're going to do here is we're going to try targeting 4K native, and I've set it to the medium graphical preset. And yeah, we're hitting around 50 FPS. This game is no joke. But one thing it is good is that it has very good frame times. It's very consistent in that way. And it used to be insanely CPU demanding. It doesn't appear to be that bad at the moment. I mean, we seem to be getting kind of close to 60 FPS. I would say that if you're the type of person that loves native resolutions, 4K native, I would say this is probably your best bet to get as close to 4K 60 experience as possible. However, let's try going with the high preset from the medium that we were at before, and now we've dropped to the mid 40s. So we lost about nearly 10 FPS just by dropping from medium to high. Very interesting. Why don't we try going to ultra? And then we can try to mess around with a bit of FSR, because ultra does look amazing. Although medium looks pretty decent too. But ultra looks definitely one of the best looking games. But now we've gone into the mid 30s, it seems. So it looks like each preset costs around 10 FPS at this resolution with the 6800 XT. But why don't we take a look at some FSR quality here? Because from what I remember, upscaling in this game actually does a pretty good job. And there you have it, 63 FPS. So we are able to get a 4K 60 Ultra experience with FSR set to quality. Now FSR quality does introduce a bit of flicker in this game, unfortunately, but it's not a bad implementation. But it does kind of mess around with that crispy 4K native image in this particular game, mainly because there's a lot of foliage and a lot of fine detail. But this game actually got FSR3 frame generation added very recently. So why don't we take a look at that? I have a feeling it's probably going to butcher the image quality just because I can already see FSR quality introducing a lot of flicker. And I have a feeling that's going to get even worse with frame generation. And yeah, I do see when you spin around the trees and the foliage, does tend to get a little bit smushy, if that makes any sense, like any rapid movements. Yeah, I don't think I would probably use frame generation in this game. I think FSR quality does a pretty decent job. Although if you're a fan of native resolution, 4K medium preset would work for a close to 60 FPS experience on The Last of Us Part 1. I have a feeling we're going to get Part 2 as soon as the PlayStation 5 remake of it
we could use
launches.
that ladder.
But anyway, let's take a look at the next game. The next game I'd like to examine is The Witcher 3, a classic. One of the greatest games. So what we're going to do here is we're going to try 4K native with Ultra Plus everything else. I like to keep the background characters to medium just because Ultra Plus is way too many of them. Although I have tested Ultra Plus, it doesn't really impact the performance all that much. But at 4K native without ray tracing, we appear to be in the mid 30s here in Novigrad, which I believe is one of the most demanding areas. That's why I wanted to test this, because it can act as sort of the worst case scenario, right? But mid 30s, not really the best way to play this game. So I say we try turning on a bit of FSR and see what happens. We're going to set FSR to quality and then leave every other setting the same as it was at Ultra Plus. Let's go ahead and do a run to Novigrad. And wow, 65 FPS? That is an insane increase of pretty much 100%. That's crazy. I've never seen gains like that before. But I have to admit, the game actually looks pretty good. I have a feeling that around foliage, that's kind of the Achilles heel of FSR. But right now, at the moment, it actually looks pretty good. Doesn't really look that much different than 4K native did, if I'm being honest. Looks pretty good. But can we turn on ray tracing? That's kind of what I want to take a look at, because the ray tracing implementation in this game looks so good, but it's extremely taxing. Let's try turning ray tracing on and see what happens. Let's go ahead and set ray tracing to quality. We'll turn everything on. And okay, 30 FPS. Yeah, why don't we try FSR balance? And it doesn't look much better. 35 FPS? Yeah. I mean, What I like the most in this game, if I'm being honest, is the global illumination. But I have a feeling that's probably going to be the most taxing. So right now we're only using global illumination set to quality with FSR set to balance at 4K Ultra Plus every other setting. We're in the mid 40s. It's not ideal, not the ideal way to play this game. But I do want to keep global illumination on. So why don't we go from Ultra Plus on the other graphical settings to high and see if we can gain any more performance. That way we were at the mid 40s and right now we seem to be in the low 50s. Well, let's reload my save and go around Novigrad again. So right now we have Ray Trace Global Illumination to quality with FSR set to balance and all the other graphical settings set to high. I mean, we appear to be in the mid 50s and our 1% lows are actually pretty good. Their 44 frame time graph actually looks pretty good. There's no stutters or hitches or anything like that. I would say this game is definitely playable this way. Now, do you like to play with FSR set to balance? It actually doesn't look that bad, but I do notice a bit of flicker with the fine detail. Personally, I find that to be a bit distracting, but some other people may not care. But either way, you could play this at 4K 60, maxed everything out with FSR set to quality and ray tracing off. The game still looks amazing with the next gen update. So yeah, I would say Witcher 3 pretty well on the 6800 XT. You can definitely make it happen and have a very enjoyable. But anyway, let's check out the next game. The next game we're going to take a look at is A Plague Tale Requiem. And this game is actually very, very demanding. And as you can see, the frame rate can fluctuate quite a bit, actually, depending on what's going on the screen. And right now, we're running the game with all maxed out setting, except for the ray trace shadows. We're going to take a look at the ray trace shadows, although I genuinely feel that will not be an option. But that's okay. Anyway, so right now, we seem to be getting anywhere between 30 and 40 FPS, although sometimes it can jump as high as 50. Now in this game, I do believe this is one of those games where you can actually get away even if you were to target 40 FPS, because it's a lot. The gameplay is not like a fat. It's more strategic, I would say, the type of gameplay that it is. So it's not. Although some people will disagree, and that's perfectly fine. I do feel that 40 FPS would still be enjoyable, at least for me, if I had to. But we do have choices, and I think we could probably try to get 60 FPS with the 6800 XT. So why don't we go ahead and make some tweaks? For starters, we're going to change the resolution optimizer from ultra quality to quality, because this game does not have FSR, unfortunately, not yet. And it's kind of weird. They need to put FSR in the game. The crazy thing is the game was made by Asobo Studio, same people that made Microsoft Flight Simulator. Now they usually partner with NVIDIA, which is fine, but Microsoft Flight Simulator has FSR too. And this game actually uses a modified version of the Flight Simulator engine. So, I don't know, it's almost like they've abandoned it. I mean, it's a really good game. And as you can see here, just by going from the ultra quality resolution optimizer to quality, we gained around 16% of extra FPS, which is actually pretty decent. But can we do even better than that? Let's see what we can do. What I'd like to tweak now is leave the resolution optimizer to quality, then change the graphical preset from the ultra that we had it previously to high. So this will knock every graphical setting down a peg. And we know that high to ultra can be very taxing. So let's hope we can gain some more performance. And yeah, you can already see that we're getting a lot more FPS. We were hitting the 40s and 30s in this particular area here, and we seem to be in the mid 50s. That's actually very good. I would say this qualifies as a 4K 60 experience in my opinion. It's very close to 60, and with the VRR display, again, you don't really notice that it's not at 60 FPS. But yeah, this is actually looks very good in my opinion. I couldn't tell you that it looks any different from ultra to high. That seems to usually be the case with games. And even if there was a bit of a difference, I think over time you would just get used to it because the frame rate is so much better. The game is so much more enjoyable that, yeah, I would have to say that 6800 XT can do this game at 4K. with the quality resolution optimizer and the high graphical preset. Game looks amazing. But I did promise you ray tracing, so let's take a look at it. As you can see here, we're getting 60 FPS out in the open world with a lot of foliage, forests. Pretty good, right? Well, let's go ahead and turn ray trace shadows on and see what happens. We still have our resolution optimizer to quality, and the graphical preset is still on high. Let's go ahead and toggle ray tracing to on. 20 FPS. Oh my god. Well, that's the most taxing shadows I've ever seen in my life. Boy. Holy cow. Wow. Actually, it's the first time I see this. I suppose we could try knocking the resolution optimizer to balance and see if that improves at all. Performance, ultra performance. I think we need ultra performance, guys. I think that's the only way. With 20 FPS. Oh, wow. And we doubled our frame rate, but now the game looks soft as hell. Yeah, no. That's why I said ray tracing isn't really worth it. Not with this setup anyway. And the game looks so good even without it. So, I mean, the lighting in this game, when this came out, it was one of the best looking games when it came to the global illumination that they're using. So, yeah. But anyway, let's check out the next game. Ray tracing is a no-no. Not in this game. The next game on our list will be Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. And we're going to begin with a 4K native, all the graphical settings maxed out, and we actually have a lot of tweaks we can make into this game because we have FSR 3 and we also have frame generation. But at 4K native, we're getting around 50 FPS, which for this game actually is not that bad because this is a turn-based game as far as combat goes. So I have to admit that it actually feels pretty good to play with the type of frame rate that we're getting. And it's quite a lot going on in here as well. But why don't we go ahead and try some FSR quality? Actually, FSR does a pretty decent job here. This is another game that has FSR native AA as well, but we can't really use that because we need to gain more performance. So we're going to go with FSR quality, and will you look at that? That's a lot of FPS we gained back. We were at 50 and we're at 90 now. That is a huge amount of frame rate gain that we got just by enabling FSR to quality. It actually looks pretty good. You can notice a bit of flicker, but it's actually not that bad at all. I mean, the trade-off is 100% worth it. Absolutely. Actually looks pretty decent, if I say so myself. As a matter of fact, I remember when this game first came out, it had some problems with DLSS, actually. There was a bit of ghosting, which I think they've since fixed with the latest update, if I remember correctly. But yeah, you kidding me? 90 FPS with this type of game, it's ideal for me anyway. This is one of those games we can get lost in for hours. There's so many little mini games and all kinds of stuff. It's actually a lot of fun. I do like these games. And as a fan of RPGs and even turn-based RPGs, actually this is kind of my jam, if I'm being honest. Very unique game. Leaving it here would be just fine, but why not check frame generation? I mean, we got it. We're probably going to get some ridiculous amounts of FPS here. Yes, we are. We're at 130 FPS. I'm actually above my display's refresh rate, which is an LGC 120Hz OLED TV. But yeah, ton of frames. Actually doesn't look too bad. Although personally, I would probably just stick with FSR set to quality and play the game that way. But anyway, let's check the last couple games. The next three and last games for this video is going to be RoboCop. These are all going to be Unreal Engine 5 games. For this one, we're targeting TSR at 65% resolution with all the settings on Epoch. You might be asking, why am I not using FSR? Well, that's because the FSR implementation in this game has been for a while now very bad. It's extremely flickery and extremely noisy as well, that I feel TSR actually does the best job here. XeSS does a pretty decent job as well, but that you don't gain as much FPS with that one. You gain a little bit more with TSR, and TSR does a pretty good job. It is a temporal upscaler, and we're able to be pretty close to 60 FPS, the mid-50s. This game is quite taxing, if I'm being honest. Now you might be thinking that the interior areas, you'd probably be able to get a little more uh, performance, but no. Actually, the interior areas in this game are quite a bit more taxing on your hardware than the exterior areas. Now I don't know if it's because of the reflections maybe, or the lighting, could be, but I mean, we are getting around 55 FPS with some drops to the high 40s, I guess. But I would say it's a pretty good gaming experience, right? But why don't we try throwing the graphics preset from ultra to high? Now, usually with Unreal Engine 5 games, you don't gain as much as what you'd probably normally be used to. And I mean, this case, it's not so bad. We were in the high 40s sometimes, and we appear to be in the mid 50s as the lowest point. So that's actually pretty good. And I'd say the game still looks really good. We still have lumen reflections, except for all the other graphical settings are on high. It's definitely the closest 4K 60 you will be able to get with the 6800 XT in RoboCop, which is an Unreal Engine 5 very taxing game. But anyway, let's take a look at the next Unreal Engine 5 game and see how that does. The next game we're going to take a look at is Jusant. This is a French indie game. It's a climbing game. You have to climb from the bottom of this mountain. It's like a tower all the way to the top. And look at this. With all the settings maxed out at 4K, we're in the mid 30s. Now, this game is an excellent example of lumen. The lighting in this game is absolutely insane. It's a very relaxing game with very good music, very atmospheric. But I want to try going from maximum to high on the settings and see if we can gain some more performance back. I'd like to try this before we resort to any form of upscaling just yet. And yeah, we clawed back quite a bit of performance. We went from the mid-30s to the high 40s. And again, that's at 4K native with the 6800 XT. I wish there was like a Nintendo would make a Zelda game that was in this style of graphics with lumen. It would be so beautiful. But that's kind of what it reminds me of. I'm going to try to knock down some settings to medium. Not all of them, just the ones that tend to be a bit more demanding, I guess. The anti-aliasing, global illumination, and shadows. Those tend to be the most costly of settings in games usually. And this game, you can actually claw back some performance by toning those down, which is not something you usually see with Unreal Engine 5 games. They usually do a lot better when you use upscaling. But I wanted to try everything but upscaling. And yeah, look at this. We're seem to be getting around 60 FPS. Unreal Engine 5, however, responds pretty well to upscaling. So why don't we set everything back to maximum and then turn on some FSR to quality and see if we can get a 60 FPS experience that way. And yeah, we're actually pretty close to 60 FPS, and that's with everything on maximum, which I feel the global illumination needs to be on maximum because the lighting in this game is it's so good. Especially when you enter the big caves and there's these glowing creatures and flora and fauna that illuminate the area. It looks really, really good. But as you saw, up there was actually quite a bit more demanding than down here. I think it's probably because of the grass, the green grass, I guess. But we are in the 60s over here. Yeah, beautiful game. You can see the interior areas here. The lighting is just really, really good. I wish Nintendo would make a Zelda game that was in Unreal Engine 5, but they probably won't do it for another 10 years or so. But anyway, we have one more game to take a look at, and that's another Unreal Engine 5 game. So let's do it. The last game will be Lords of the Fallen, and I actually was looking at FSR quality, and it does have a bit of flickering issues in this game. So what I decided to do was set the resolution scale to 75% and then keep everything else to ultra. Actually, resolution scale in this game does a pretty decent job, believe it or not. And the ultra setting is actually quite taxing. You can actually drop the high and gain quite a bit more performance back. But I actually played the ton of this game when it came out. I didn't finish it. I know, story of my life, but I did spend a lot of hours, had a lot of fun. And I don't recall this, the game being like a bit stuttery like this. So it was kind of a surprise to me. I don't know if a lot has changed. Now, it doesn't happen all the time. And there is particular areas where a stutter always happens. There is traversal stutter issues with Unreal Engine 5. For example, I remember there's one right here, right there. It happens every time. I've benchmarked the heck out of this game, and it happens in every single combination of hardware I got. That one. But these random stutters here, I can't recall that this game ever had any stuttering issues for me. But, I mean, maybe it is shader caching because it's a fresh install of the game. So it could be that maybe they go away after some time. But for a game like this, any stutter is a death wish. It's just you have to be on your game with this one constantly. But it is a pretty good game. It's fun. It's just that I found it had a lot of ads just for the sake of it. It's almost like the developers are trolling you. So as much as I did enjoy it, I found it to be, I'm not going to say repetitive, because I mean every game is repetitive, but it's just that, you know, when you enter the death realm, there's just like so many ads out of nowhere, and some push you off of cliffs and stuff. It just like feels a bit cheap. So I got kind of tired of that, I guess you could say. But I mean, other than that, the little stutters aside, clearly you can get a 4K 60 experience. I mean, Unreal Engine 5 games tend to be very flexible. You can either tone down the resolution scaler, which works pretty good actually. You have access to FSR, DLSS if you have an NVIDIA GPU, and a lot of them also have frame generation on the NVIDIA side. We have yet to see it as plentiful on the AMD side, so hopefully that changes. But still, I still feel that the 6800 XT is the best GPU graphics card you can buy right now for 4K. Absolutely. Or a 1440p monster, high refresh rate guaranteed. Except for, you know, the crazy demanding games. But as you can see, with the 16GB VRAM buffer, you can do pretty good. And then you have the 7800 XT, which is practically identical to the 6800 XT in gaming performance. But the 7800 XT can be had for around $500 brand new, which is actually not a bad price if you wanted to go that route. But if you want to save some money, man, on the secondhand market, you can find 6800 XTs for around $300. That is a heck of a price. The PlayStation 5 Pro's performance is rumored to be around a 7700 XT as far as rasterization goes. With the 6800 XT, you get even more performance. Instead of buying an $800 or whatever it's going to cost the PlayStation 5 Pro, I think now's as good a time as any to build a pretty kick-ass PC that will rival and beat any console, at least until the next generation, in my opinion, anyway. Plus, you get PC. You get the biggest library of games ever. No pay for online play. And you get Xbox games. You get PlayStation games. But yeah, that's what I think. The 6800 XT is my favorite AMD GPU. Even though I have a 7900 XTX, clearly the XTX is a lot more powerful. But there's something about the 6800 XT I like. Maybe it's the time I bought it and the fact that they were able to match NVIDIA even on the high end. So yeah, that's what I think. I think the 6800 XT is an awesome GPU. 4K, 1440p, it'll do it all. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Put a lot of time into this. I've never made a video this long. I hope it does okay, and I hope it's informative to somebody. So thanks for watching. Give it a like if you liked it, and subscribe for more content. I appreciate you watching, and I hope you have a great rest of the day. Bye.